Okay, in this fantasy Strat-O-Matic series, I have really two of my favorite teams from the 1990 Diamond Gem set. Uh, Got the 1990 Cincinnati Reds against the 1995 Cleveland Indians. And through a roll of the 20-side die, the home field advantage goes to the 1995 Indians. So the first two games will be played in Cleveland. And what I always do is I just play DH in the AL Park, and in the NL Park, I have the pitchers hitting. So the first thing that I had to do for the 1990 Cincinnati Reds was try to pinpoint who their designated hitter might have been. And what I very simply decided to do was just insert Bill Doran at second base and just move Mariano Duncan from second base to designated hitter. So that's their lineup for game number one as they face Ken Hill, who's on the mound for the Cleveland Indians. And Cleveland's lineup is pretty much set in stone every day. The only difference is they have a platoon at first base between Perry and Sorrento. So let's get into the results of game number one. Again, this is 1990 Cincinnati Reds and the 1995 Cleveland Indians, game one of seven. Tom Browning on the mound for the Reds, and as I just stated, Ken Hill on the mound for the 1995 Cleveland Indians. So you can see the 1990 Cincinnati Reds take game number one by a score of 4-1, where this game pretty much followed the recipe for the 1990 Cincinnati Reds. Get ahead early and stay ahead with starting pitching and bullpen. You could see Tom Browning had a very solid outing. After he gave up a one-out single to Jim Thome in the bottom half of the seventh inning, I brought in Rob Dibble to pitch to Sandy Alomar. Alomar got a hit off of the fielding chart, but then Dibble rebounded by striking out Lofton and Vizquel to end the bottom half of the seventh inning. And then Randy Myers comes in the ninth inning and retires Cleveland 1-2-3. You could see nice day out of Hal Morris, who was hitting fifth for the 1990 Reds as he goes 2 for 3 with a home run, 2 RBI, and 2 runs scored. And this is one of the reasons why I really like the 1990 Cincinnati Reds. If you remember my team analysis on this team, it's a very nice lineup that really goes deep. You get nice production out of the bottom of your order, and especially now in with this game in particular, where you have a designated hitter inserted into the lineup. You could see there was some traffic as far as your 8, 9 guys getting on base and making things happen as Mariano Duncan goes 1 for 3 with a double and a walk and a run scored, and Bill Doran, who is hitting ninth, playing second base, goes 2 for 4 with an RBI and a stolen base. So the 1990 Cincinnati Reds take the first game of this best of seven series against the 1995 Cleveland Indians by a score of 4-1. Okay, so as we move on to game number two, we have Jose Rio going for the 1990 Reds and Oral Hershiser going for the 1995 Indians. Let's see what happens in game number two here with the Reds holding a 1-0 series lead. And you're going to see right here that the Cleveland Indians are able to take it by a final score of 6-3. Let me show you what happened in the bottom half of the seventh inning here with the score tied at 3. Norm Charlton was on the mound. He got the last out in the bottom half of the sixth inning as he retired Kenny Lofton. And then in the bottom half of the seventh, we had a leadoff walk by Vizquel. He steals second. Baerga makes out. So the next move was to intentionally walk Albert Bell. There was no way I was going to let Albert Bell beat Cincinnati in that situation. So that brings up Eddie Murray. He strikes out. So with 2 on and 2 out in a 3-3 game, we've got the lefty Norm Charlton still on the mound facing Jim Thome, and Thome comes through with an RBI double. That's followed by another intentional walk to Manny Ramirez. Pinch hit Herbert Perry for Paul Sorrento, and he comes through with the kill shot. He gets the 2 RBI single to put Cleveland up 6-3, and that's the way the game would end. You see a very nice performance by the Indians bullpen, as to be expected. Julian Tavares gets the win out of the pen, 2 scoreless innings. Then Assenmacher for a scoreless inning, and then Jose Mesa pitches a perfect ninth inning. So the 1995 Indians and 1990 Cincinnati Reds are tied 1 game apiece as we move the series to Cincinnati for games 3, 4, and 5. Okay, let's take a look at what happens in game number 3. Your starting pitchers are Charles Nagy and Jack Armstrong. So let's see what happens here. In the top half of the third inning, with the Cleveland Indians up 2-1 and the bases loaded and 2 out, we have Paul Sorrento hitting a grand slam. So Cleveland is up 6-1 after 2.5 innings. Then the 1990 Cincinnati Reds start clawing back into the game. With 1 out in the bottom of the third, we had Billy Hatcher hitting a 2-run home run to make the score 6-3. And then in the bottom half of the fourth inning, we have Hal Morris leading off the inning with a home run to make it 6-4. Then after a Sabo strikeout and a walk to the catcher, Jeff Reed, I decided that was enough for Charles Nagy. I needed to kind of change the momentum of the game a little bit, so I bring in Eric Plunk. That didn't work out as Mariano Duncan hits a 2-run home run to tie the game at 6. So through 4 innings in game number 3, we have a 6-6 tie. And the Cincinnati Reds would take the lead for good in the bottom half of the 5th inning. You see Barry Larkin led off by striking out. Then we have a home run by Paul O'Neill. Eric Davis gets a triple. Take out Eric Plunk. Bring in lefty Jim Poole. I decide to leave Hal Morris in there. I think Hal Morris's card is just good enough against left-handed pitching, and I didn't want to do the switch that early in the game for the Cincinnati Reds in case later on in the game we were to see Jose Mesa for the Indians. So, and Hal Morris comes through with an RBI single. So Cincinnati leads 8-6 after 5, and you'll see that's how the game stayed, as you had a very nice outing by the Cincinnati Reds bullpen. You get 6 scoreless innings, with Rick Mailer actually getting the win out of the pen as he goes 1 scoreless inning. And then you get 2 innings out of Charlton and Dibble. Randy Myers closes the game. The 95 Indians did make the game interesting in the top half of the 9th inning. Let me show you the play-by-play here. Tony Pena leads off with a pinch hit single. Then Kenny Lofton walks. And with Omar Vizquel up with 2 on and nobody out, I decide the right play here is to just move the runners over and bunt them over to try to get them in scoring position, because I do really like Carlos Baerga's runner advance hits on his card. So Vizquel gets the runners over. However, Baerga makes an out without advancing any runners. So with second and third and 2 out, I decide to go against the grain here, and I kind of said to myself, okay, if I'm the 1990 Cincinnati Reds, I'm not letting Albert Bell beat me here. So I intentionally walk him, pitch to Tomey, and Jim Tomey strikes out. As it turns out, it wouldn't have mattered because what I rolled for Jim Tomey would have been a strikeout on the pitcher's card either way. But that's how Game 3 goes down. The 1990 Cincinnati Reds come back from a 6-1 deficit after 2.5 innings and win the game by a score of 8-6. And you're starting to see a pattern form here where you're seeing with these two teams, the 95 Indians and the 1990 Cincinnati Reds, you're not seeing anyone coming back late in games. And I kind of expected that going into the series. I felt going in that this would be a series where most games, if a team had a lead after the 6th or 7th inning, it would be very hard for the other team to come back. I feel that way for the 1995 Indians when you look at guys like Julian Tavares and Jose Mesa closing out games, and obviously feel that way for the 1990 Cincinnati Reds with their big 2 out of the bullpen with Dibble and Myers. So we're starting to see that pattern form here. Through 3 games, we have the 1990 Cincinnati Reds up 2-1. So as we move on to game number 4 now, with the 1990 Reds up 2-1, your game 4 starters are Dennis Martinez for the Indians and Danny Jackson for the Reds. And you're going to see the 95 Indians are able to hold on and win the game 4-3 in a game where you could see On the Indian side of the play-by-play here, a game where they just had a ton of base runners and just couldn't um, really pull out to a really big lead. They only led 2-0 after six. Sandy Alomar hits a two-run homer in the top of the seventh to make it 4-0. And then the 90 Reds were able to cut the lead in half with two runs at the bottom of the seventh. And then let me take you through what happens here in the bottom of the ninth inning. In a 4-2 game, I bring in the closer, Jose Mesa, and you're going to see here how Morris leads off by striking out. Then you get a single by Sabo, which was off of Jose Mesa's card. And Jose Mesa only has like two, maybe three hits on his card against right-handed batters. Um, and then that's followed by catcher Jeff Reed. He walks, and I pinch run Todd Benzinger since that is the potential tying run on base right there. And then Mariano Duncan, he too gets a hit off of Jose Mesa's card. So you've got the bases loaded and one out, and the Cincinnati Reds have gotten two hits off the bats of right-handed hitters off of Jose Mesa's card, which is very hard to do. So I'm thinking right here that the Reds are going to come back and at least tie the game. Um, Ron Oster gets an RBI single. I just wasn't crazy about running Benziger home, even though, he was a little higher of a run rating than Jeff Reed. Um, so I was feeling good from a Red standpoint with bases loaded and one out with Billy Hatcher and Barry Larkin up next. But Billy Hatcher, I roll a 6-9 on Jose Mesa's card, and luckily for him and the Indians, that's a ground ball to shortstop, which is basically an automatic double play with Omar Vizquel. So that is how Game 4 wraps up. Cleveland gets a game that they absolutely had to have to tie the series at 2 games apiece. They win Game 4, 4-3. All right, Game 5, series tied 2 games apiece. We got Ken Hill on the mound for the Indians and Tom Browning for the Cincinnati Reds in a rematch of the Game 1 starters. And you're going to see the 1995 Indians are able to win this one again by a score of 4-3. This one in come from behind fashion as they trailed 3-1 in the top half of the eighth inning, and they're able to get 3 runs across with Norm Charlton on the mound. The big hit, a 2-out, 2 RBI single by Sandy Alomar. And this is honestly where I feel like I did the 90 Reds an injustice here. I should have had Dibble warming up and ready to go against Alomar. Frankly, I don't know why I didn't. Uh, so either way, the 95 Indians are able to take a 4-3 lead into the bottom half of the eighth inning. And once again, you get a solid combination out of Tavares, Assenmacher, and Mesa as they throw up zeros for the last 2 innings. So the 1995 Cleveland Indians take a 3-2 series lead headed back to Cleveland for Game 6. Okay, so in game number 6 now with the 95 Indians up 3-2, we have Jose Rio on the mound for the Reds and Oral Hershiser on the mound for the Indians, rematch of the Game 2 starters. And you're going to see the 1995 Indians are able to close the series out in 6 games by winning this one by a score of 3-2. Let me walk you through what happened here in the eighth inning because you can see the play-by-play here. Gets a little sloppy and can be a little hard to follow. After Julian Tavares threw a scoreless 7th inning, Paul O'Neill was to lead off the top half of the 8th inning for the Cincinnati Reds. So what I decided to do was bring in Paul Assenmacher to get Paul O'Neill out of the game, and that brings up Glenn Braggs off the bench for the Reds. He leads off with a single. And from here on out, I basically went righty-lefty the entire way. With Eric Davis up next, I bring in Chad OJ. He strikes out Eric Davis. Then I take OJ out of the game and bring in lefty Jim Poole. So the Reds pitch in Todd Benzinger. He strikes out. After that, I decide to bring in Jose Mesa for a potential 4-out save. He gives up a 2-out single to Chris Sabo. And then the 90 Reds, I decided to pinch hit Ron Oster for Jeff Reed just because I was just getting nothing out of Jeff Reed. And looking back on the series, I don't know why I followed the Strat-O-Matic book so strictly with the 1990 Reds lineup. What I really should have done throughout this series was hit Reed more towards the bottom of the order, especially in the games in Cleveland with the designated hitter. But according to the Strat-O-Matic book, Jeff Reed was number 7 in the order. But anyway, nonetheless, Ron Oster makes out to end the 8th inning. And in the top of the 9th inning, the Reds did make it interesting. They were able to put 2 men on. Mariano Duncan leads off by making out. Then you had a walk by Bill Doran. Billy Hatcher makes out. Then you had a single by Barry Larkin. So with Glenn Braggs coming up and the righty on the mound, I decide to pinch hit Herm Winningham. And with 2 on and 2 out, he makes out. So the Cleveland Indians are able to take Game 6 by a score of 3-2, and they win the series 4-2. In a series that played out pretty much the way I expected going in, I thought this would be a very close series throughout, and you're going to see in the total runs scored in the series. I don't ever remember having this happen. You could see in the 6 games, those are the run totals for the 90 Reds and the 95 Indians. Just want to highlight a couple of players who had big series for the 95 Indians. The big one that really comes to mind is setup guy Julian Tavares, and you're going to see his numbers right there. He was absolutely lights out in this series, and he got a lot of really, really big outs in the series for the 95 Indians, basically handing the ball off to Jose Mesa, and you're going to see that he was perfect in this series. In 4 games, he has 4 saves. He did allow some base runners in the series, but he was able to get all the big outs. And really, the big hitting performance for the 95 Indians, and this really came up big in the series, considering the fact that he hits towards the bottom of the order. You can see Sandy Alomar had a really, really nice series for Cleveland as he has 2 home runs, 6 RBIs in the series. So those are my results from playing a fantasy series between the 1990 Cincinnati Reds and 1995 Cleveland Indians. 95 Indians win the series in 6 games. I thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you all down the road.